G'day, folks. It is the coach here, and I am very, very, very excited about this episode because, one, it is the hottest army in AOS right now. It is so hot that you can't even buy the battle tome off the shelf. I have gone through the internet trying to look for leaks and tips and tricks, and I'm trying to learn everything without a battle tome, but I have the Aelf Bro going to talk to me all about the Lumineth Realm Lords. I'm going to try to understand what this army is all about. I've certainly heard all the podcasts. I've heard all the reviews, but I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And Hayden is an absolute Aelf bro. He truly is an Aelf bro. I remember when we played at the Masters, or we were at the Masters together, you were running elves.
Man, Draconis, back before Draconis was a thing.
You were ordered Draconis back in 2016. Yep. So if anyone earns the right to be on this show and talk all things elves, it is Hayden Walker. He is a Masters level player. He's very, very, very good when it comes to elves, but also the game. You did have a channel for a while and it's kind of been paused, but how are you, mate?
Oh, good. Uni's a lovely thing, as everyone who's been to uni can probably tell.
I'm glad I'm not juggling my MBA and full-time study anymore because that is not fun. But what is fun is Warhammers.
Yes, it is. War Dollies is the one thing that's getting me through all this. So it's good times right now.
Hopefully we'll let you buy some more War Dollies when maybe a reward for the second release for the Lumineth Realm Lords. Fingers crossed, maybe that sexy little pay increase from all that beautiful study. But
that's it.
Lumineth Realm Lords.
Yeah.
What's this army all about? What drew you to the army? What's the appeal? Because to me, it's kind of high elfy, but it's not high elf. And they've got some characters like Teclis who have kind of been brought over. There's no Tyrion. I'm not going to try to trigger you just yet. But
please
what is this army all about, and what drew you to it?
So back in the old days, back in 6th and 7th edition of Warhammer Fantasy, I played High Elves. They were my first fantasy army. They are my favorite army still to this day. Still have some of the greatest models from that range that I think GW has ever produced. Like Eldarian the Blind. That model is just like so good still.
To be fair, I can't be critical because I've been trying to buy White Lion Chariots right now to run it in my Cities of Sigmar, so I can't and I'm using Phoenix Guard as well, so I can't get on my high pedestal here. The High Elves are a beautiful range. Some of them are a little bit dated, but they are a cool army.
Yeah, but like you still got Shadow Warriors and all that are really, really cool models. Like they've lasted the test of time so far, and they're just the story behind the elves was really, really cool as well. So the whole sundering through with Anarian, moving through to Tyrion, Teclis, and Malekith and their story, and then going through the end times, and then everything slowly being introduced into the mortal realms through Age of Sigmar. Just the tidbits that we've heard since all of this started. It's just the mystery slowly come out, and it's been really enjoyable to see. And now they're finally here, and they're just a really interesting army to look at, even with all the battle cattle and all that people are divided on, I guess. A lot of people love them. A lot of people don't like them so much because they wanted the old school elf look, but that world's dead, plain and simple. But they're really cool models. Or the whole range is really cool. So
I think for me, I'm not going to play Lumineth, and I remember talking to people and I'm like, look, this is not the release for me. Gargants is certainly the one that I'm really interested in. But when I think about what the Lumineth Realm Lords are bringing to the table, right, you've got this classic appeal of the High Elves, and it's been reimagined to Age of Sigmars. And I think they've done a really good job. Whether you are a old school High Elf player, I think you can kind of feel like the aesthetic is still there.
Yeah,
and then
you still got the spears and bows and horses. Like aren't they the only new army that has horses in it? Like that.
Yeah, cavalry.
And then you've got all the new monsters through the battle cattle. You've got the elite style with the stone guard. There's a really good diverse range between new style and that old style phalanx of bows and spears and all the other stuff that everyone loved from the old days. So
Yeah, it's nice. It's got like a little bit of everything. It's got your cavalry, you've got, this Teclis, this supercast wizard, and back in the Warhammer Fantasy days, high elves were always known as the supercasters of the world. And I remember never being able to get a spell off, or I'd have to use extra spell dice just to be in the fighting game of spells. And certainly Teclis brings that to the table.
Yeah, Teclis is definitely a threat to your legions of Nagash just Nagash in general, and your Tzeentch and Kroak. He's definitely up there with those guys. So,
and what we're going to do very shortly is we're going to go through two of Hayden's lists. So we've decided that Hayden's going to take us through more of an elf build, and I'm going to do a future episode with someone like Liam, who is doing more of a battle cattle build. So we're going to deep dive, and one of the lists that you're going to share with us is Teclis, and you're also going to share us a non-Teclis, and it'll be interesting to find out the difference between the two, given that Teclis is so expensive. It's 1/3 of your army.
Yeah, he's definitely a big points hike in your army when you're playing at 2K at least. So.
And he's got a big target on his face. So, like to lose that, it's 1/3 of your army. So it's almost like, what are the differences between the two lists? And what can you do with that additional points, and how will that vary on the table? So I'd like to learn more from you on that. But at a very high level, before we get to the lists, what are the strengths of this book? Like from a playstyle perspective, from a hobbyist perspective, like what are those strengths that you're going to get from this book that maybe others aren't going to give you?
So from a playstyle perspective, there's a lot of ways you can play this book. It's not Sigmar with training wheels book from first couple of read through and the first couple of games that I've played. It's not one of those ones where you just go point, click, I win, which is a good experience to play with. There's a lot of magic, like a lot of magic. It reminds me a lot of the old Null Root from Sylvaneth that I used to play back in the day. Like a lot of the lists that I'm playing have 10 or 11 casts in the hero phase, potentially. So you've got to be really on top of all those mechanics and all that kind of jazz, so you're not wasting time. There's just a lot of fun. Like you've got instead of having always strike first, like they used to back in, they've got the mechanic where every time you pick a unit to activate, you get to pick 2 units. So they're bringing back that same kind of feel of always strike first, without it being the entire army fighting at the start of the hero phase or making things fight last. So you've got a blend of the new and the old without it being broken. So
because the old high elves, you used to basically always strike first unless you charge them. It was really hard to fight in combat for a high elf. So it's really cool they kind of brought that aesthetic over, and they've AOSified it. And like as I've read through the internet versions of battle tomes, like on Goonhammer and like on 4D-chan, and I've tried to get my own research on this particular book, there's some really interesting tricks, and I'm sure some of your list might have them, making someone spend 2 command points for one. If I want to do an inspiring presence, boom, I've got to use 2 command points. There's a way that I can pass off a bravery debuff. You can push me off objectives. There is super casts from people where it's basically you can't unbind it, or it's, you could make it almost impossible to unbind. So the whole army doesn't get that. So it's not like, you get all these strengths, but you've got tools in your disposal, which I don't think I've seen in any other book.
No, this book, the level this book is at reminds me very much of your More Tribes or your Big War level of book. Like it's definitely up there. With the right person playing it, it can do really, really well. But it's not something that average Joe Blojo can pick up and just go win an event with, I think. It is going to be something that I think a lot of people will actually have to play a lot of to do well, because there is some very different play styles within the book. It is a very counter-hitting book. You can make alpha strikey lists, but with some of the units, they get better when they get hit rather than when they're going out and trying to hit stuff. So, and it's definitely got a lot of tools to play in every phase of the game, which is nice. So
yeah, there's definitely, you got some good shooting, you've got good combat, you've got probably the only thing, correct me if I'm wrong, is this army doesn't seem to be fast. It feels like the opposite of Idoneth Deepkin, and it's probably more of a slower elf than we're probably used to.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot slower in terms of most things move 6 inches. A lot of it doesn't run and charge. But at the same time, you can make Dawn Riders, which are the horses, move 28 inches before charging. So,
and you've obviously got Teclis as well. You've got this big flying monster, but average, your average troops aren't nearly as fast. But yes, you've got the Dawn Rider, so you've still got that build if you want to go down that route.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely ways of having fast things get across the table, but at the same time, the whole lore behind it is that Teclis has talked to the spirit of the mountain, so and the spirit of the moon and all that kind of jazz. So they're very slow. They're still fragile because they're still elves. So a lot of the stuff is still 1 wound, 4 up save, except the Stone Guard, who are, I'll let Liam talk about them. I'm don't want to take them personally, but they hit like a truck and they don't die.
Yeah, so, they're more of an elite force, but at the same time, I mean, if I look at these, and again, we're kind of touching on the units, and we might as well bring it up very soon. Probably the other thing that I really like is you've got that, is it Shining Company? When units are close to each other, they get like really synergized buffs and they can do stuff.
Yeah, so when a model in the unit, so it's only Venari, so it's your archers, it's your spearmen, and it's your Dawn Rider horsemen. So when a model in the unit is touching 2 other bases of models in the unit, they are -1 to hit. So that's when you set them up at the start of the game. So, but when you do that, you can't run and you can't charge. So there's a downside
300, right? It's like 300 where they basically...
100%. It's a phalanx. And then you can't go back into that formation after you break it either. So you can't go, okay, I've charged, I've killed a unit, I'm going to go back into that. It's no, once you've broken it for the game. Which is more reminiscent of, I guess, what would actually happen in a proper battle. Like if a phalanx gets broken, it's hard to reform. So, it's cool they're bringing these kind of realistic rules through, that if you're in a shield wall, you're harder to hit. Funnily enough.
Which again, if you watch 300, which is just a real example that you could see physically on your screens, you can see that, they put up the shield wall, they move slow, they're slowly pushing you back. They got the pikes, the spears, over the top, the shield. So that's the kind of imagery that I have, with the Lumineth, where they're not the Deepkin, they're not Daughters of Cain. They are very different. And I think the other cool thing I just want to mention very lightly is you've got that other ability that you're kind of tapping into KO, which is your Aether Quartz reserve as well. So you've got this additional resource and spend, and there's actually a bit of a trade-off too, where if you spend it, there's going to be a negative against you, but obviously there's some ways to kind of pass that negative on. But I think that's another nice little manipulation. It kind of goes back to what you said about this army is going to take practice and time to get right. Yes, your really good player is going to be able to take it on and kind of learn, but I think this will be a slow learning process for many people. Yeah,
it'll be like Deepkin. When Deepkin first dropped, Daughters of Cain was around and they were the big bad at the time. So Deepkin kind of went under the radar. Deepkin are very, very good, but Daughters kind of outshone them at the time. Now Daughters has kind of died into the background and Deepkin's gone, well, we're still here. We're still just as good. So I think it'll be kind of one of those books, hopefully. And we learn more as we go and get some good results with them.
Well, as I bring up the list, I think about the difference between Deepkin and Daughters. Deepkin is like attacking your opponent with a scalpel, death by 1,000 cuts, while Daughters of Cain is very much like a sledgehammer, especially like the Witch Elf build, where it's just hitting your opponent in the face as quick as possible. And this certainly kind of feels like the daddy issue Deepkin, and it's very, very similar in that build. But I brought up 2 of your lists. One is a Teclis build. I think this is the Teclis build. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
I don't want to ruin Christmas, but this is Teclis. So I haven't built a list, to be brutally honest, internet. I'm finding it challenging at times to really get my head across it without the actual physical battle tome. So Hayden, I'd love you to walk me through what this is, and folks who are either watching this because they want to learn about Lumineth or they're building their own Lumineth. This is going to be some early thinking. I know you've been proxying and you've been play testing. You've got a good idea of how things are going to work. That might influence your next purchase, or when the Lumineth second wave of purchases come out, you now kind of get a good idea of how you want to synergize your limited edition box set, or some starting points to build your list. So I know some rough things, but certainly I'd love you to kind of give me a bit of insight on your thinking as well on how to make the most of the Lumineth Realm Lords abilities.
Yeah, no worries. So I'll start with the Great Nation. So your Great Nation is like your temples from Daughters of Cain, your enclaves from Deepkin, all that kind of jazz. So there's two that really stood out to me with this style of list. The style list that I write, I'm a big fan of Tyrion over Teclis. So a lot of the stuff that I have is stuff that could go in a Tyrion army as well as a Teclis army, just because I want that kind of style. Two nations that stood out to me, one is Zytrek, which is one that both these lists are. There's a very magic-heavy city. So what it does is it makes every unit have +1 to cast and unbind and dispel the first time they try to do it in a turn. So everything that's a 1 cast wizard will always have +1 to cast, +1 to unbind or dispel. That's just innate across the army. The first time they do it per turn.
Oh, per turn?
Per turn.
And do you have a lot of double casters?
I have 1 double cast. So everything in the army except Teclis is a single cast wizard.
Okay, so Teclis will only get that the first time, but obviously we've got some stuff to talk about with Teclis.
Yeah, Teclis is another whole.
But basically, you don't have to worry about your second cast not getting that +1 because everything is a single caster, with the exception of Teclis, and Teclis is his own separate beast.
Yeah, and you need to remember as well, each of your units are wizards. So that means that when you're trying to do the +1 to get your mortal wounds off, you're only needing to roll a 5 rather than a 6. So it makes it a lot easier. There's a lot of synergy buffs that go with the army as well, which getting that +1 is always nice. The command trait
just a quick one on the wizards. The wizard acts a little bit different to other armies, right? So, for example, pink horrors are a wizard as long as they are 9 models or more. This is a bit more like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, right? Where the unit champion acts as the wizard. So the unit the unit's not a wizard; it's the hero in the wizard.
Yes. So the
hero in the unit, the hero in the wizard, the hero in the unit.
So the champion is the wizard, but only when there's a specific number of models in the unit. So, for example, for the Wardens, the High Warden is your wizard, who is the champion, but he is only a wizard until you have less than 5 models.
Okay.
So there still needs to be that decent amount of models to have it continue to be a wizard, but at the same time, they die quite quickly. So if you're losing 5, then it's not. Yeah.
I only point that out because I know very early on I saw some people trying to build lists with things like chronomatic cogs, for example, where the unit would cast cogs, they would slow down time, they would get +1 to their armor save, or they get to re-roll their armor saves. But obviously that would only come into effect with the unit champion, not the unit in general. So I guess that's why I'm pulling that out.
Yeah, because especially with that interaction, it says the wizard gets to re-roll its saves. And because the wizard that's manipulating the cogs is the unit champion, only he would get to re-roll his saves. Rules was written. So it'll be interesting to see when an FAQ comes out how that is exactly determined. But from the rules as I understand it, that's the way that it works. As cool as it would be to have a unit of 30 ethereal wardens re-rolling their armor save, I don't think that'll be allowed for some reason. But here we are. Yeah. So with Zytrek as well, just going through, they also get an extra spell that the entire army knows. So it's Overwhelming Heat. You pick a unit wholly within 24. They halve their movement until your next hero phase. And if you roll higher than their armor save, so say they've got a 3-up save, if you roll a 3 or more, they take D3 mortal wounds in addition to that.
And it's a casting value of 7.
Casting value of 7, yeah.
Okay, it's not bad, especially with these high armored units out there.
Yeah, and especially because it gives you board control, because it can be cast from any unit. It's not just the heroes. So it gives you control in making people move as slow as you do, which is a big one, as well as a little bit of extra mortal wound output. So it's always nice. So that's Zytrek. The other one that I was looking at was Sire. Sire gives you an extra Aether Quartz on every unit. So each one has 2 instead of 1. Aether Quartz is really, really good, as we were talking about before. So you can use it to do +1 to your save in a phase. You can use it to re-roll a casting roll or add 1 to a casting roll after you've cast a spell. This is the big thing, is that you don't have to declare it at the start of the phase. You just go, okay, well, I'm going to add 1 to my save, or I'm going to add 1 to that casting roll or re-roll that casting roll. Another one you can do is +1 to hit on a unit, or you can do this one. You do have to declare at the start of the phase, which is cast an extra spell with a wizard, which is a big one as well.
Yeah, that's massive.
Yeah, so each unit having 1 is great. In Sire, they get 2 each. So the downside to using Aether Quartz is that whoever uses it, that unit is -1 to their bravery characteristic for the rest of the game. But the Kalaitzidis, which is one of the 5 wound heroes, can actually channel that -1 debuff into an enemy unit within 18 inches. So then you use it, and then they're -1 to their bravery for the rest of the game.
Yeah, which is nasty. I mean, it's partially nasty. There's a lot of bravery 10 out there, so neg 1, it's not that good.
Neg
but then I think things like Oryx, for example, Ogres, Cities of Sigmar, there's a lot of like bravery 4 to 6 as well. So
yeah,
that'd be brutal, especially with like those 4 wound models.
Yeah, and the other thing with it as well, as we'll go into and we go through a bit more of the list, is that there's ways to get people to -3, -4 bravery, if not more. It can get very... The Lumineth bravery bomb is, I think, going to be something that we're going to see a lot of, hopefully. It's
do you think some of those forbidden power endless spells with like a debuff with more negatives to bravery could... Well, actually, I'm kind of jumping forward. Maybe they're in this list. Maybe they're in another list. But quickly on the Aether Quartz reserve, while we're talking about them, do you see all 4 of them being useful? Do you see some being more popular than others very early on?
The +1 to hit is nice, but with a lot of these units, you're fishing for mortal wounds anyway. So, like, it depends what you're throwing it on. I think the +1 to save is definitely one that you're going to see lots. Because the army is mostly 4-up saves, so going from a 4-up to a 3-up
with 1 wound,
and being -1 to hit, you're suddenly getting a squishy unit being not so squishy. But the big thing as well to remember is that there is a spell that can make you ethereal, or make a unit ethereal. If you do that, you can't use the Aether Quartz to give you +1 to your save.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because it's still a modifier to your save. So.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So we know a little bit about the Great Nation. Let's talk about your leader choices here. So we've got is it the Cathars? How do you pronounce it?
The Cathlars, yes.
Cathlars. So you've got 2 Cathlars. One is your general. The one that is your general, the command trait is Fast Learner. And then the artifact you have is the Silver Wand. You've got 2 of those, obviously one being the general, and then your other leader selection is the Archmage Teclis and on his Spirit of Hysh. So talk me through your leader choices. What do these bring to the table? Why the double hero, for example?
Yeah. So the Cathalar is one... one of the best units in the book, if not my favorite unit from the book. If you don't know what it is, that's the Veil Lady. She's very, very good as a synergy piece in the army. So she's a 5-wound character with a 5-up save. She's able to channel that Aether Quartz into other units, but her best ability is actually the one on her War Scroll. So she's a Hag Queen from 18 inches, pretty much. So she makes units pass their bravery. Like before you take a Battle Shock test on a 2-up, they pass Battle Shock automatically.
Wow.
You do not take a Battle Shock test. And then you can channel that, whatever models you lost from that unit, into another unit that has to take a Battle Shock test that turn. So an enemy unit.
So is that a command ability? Is that just a regular ability?
That is a regular ability on her War Scroll.
So if they take like a big hit of damage, you're then able to pass that Battle Shock test essentially over to your opponent and make it harder for them?
As long as they're taking a Battle Shock test. So the way it's worded, it says you do the 2-up first, and then if in addition, you can pass that on to another unit within 18.
So if you roll the 1, if
you roll the 2-up,
your
unit does not have to take Battle Shock. Because it specifically says before you take a Battle Shock test. So you can Inspiring Presence after that. Even if you fail the 2-up, you can use the Inspiring Presence command ability to make that unit pass. Because it's not instead of taking a Battle Shock test, it's before you do one. Or it's,
so how do you pass it on? How do you pass it on? You roll a 1, or is it the 2+ stuff?
Yeah, it's a 2+. If you pass your Battle Shock test, you pass it on to another unit. An enemy unit.
Okay, so I've got a unit of 10 dudes or 10 chicks, whatever, like just a unit of things. I lose 5 of them, and I roll my potential. I don't want to do Battle Shock just yet, so I roll that dice. It's 2+. Got it. Cool. Because I suffered 5 wounds to that unit, I can then make my opponent take a Battle Shock test, counting as 5 wounds taken or 5 models taken.
As long as they're already taking a Battle Shock test.
Okay,
so they have to lose a model to get that added on. If they have
they can inspire presence as well.
Yeah, exactly, right? and then they pass it. Yeah. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, it just adds that number to whatever their role is.
See, either you're going to make more of the unit run, or you're going to force them to maybe they weren't going to do an Inspiring Presence, but now that number is too great that they have to.
Yeah.
And obviously that potentially synergizes really well with any ways that you could make them spend 2 command points for that Inspiring Presence.
And it's great against things like eels and sharks, which are or Mournfang or something like that. Something that if they lose a model, losing another model is huge because they're such high points or they're high wounds in an elite unit. You don't want that kind of stuff running away. So if you lose, say, from a unit of 20, you lose 10, suddenly that's +10 to their roll. You're forcing them to do that. Otherwise, they're potentially losing their whole unit.
Yeah. So, that's brutal. And this is the kind of some of the tricks we were talking about earlier where, people aren't expecting this type of thing. So you've got some unique play style to the table. Okay, cool. Silver Wand, according to the interwebs, that allows the model to cast an extra spell.
Yeah, so it becomes a 2-cast wizard. The other thing with Zytrek as well is that every hero in the army knows an extra spell from the lore. So they know 2 spells from the lore each.
Okay.
So the general becomes a 2-cast 2 unbind because Fast Learner gives them an extra unbind as well. And the second unbind is rerollable. Yeah. So your first unbind is at +1.
Is that just an unbind or is that a dispel as well?
That's an unbind. Yeah.
Just an unbind.
Okay. An unbind, yeah. So it means that the first one they try and unbind is at +1. The second one is rerollable.
That's nasty.
So, yeah. The thing that War Scroll Builder doesn't have is a few of the artifact traits when I did this the first time and sent it through to Anthony. So the second Kalathar has the Zytrek artifact, which gives it a 6+ shrug. But because Teclis is on the field, it's a 4-up shrug.
Gotcha. And I was going to ask you about that because I'm reading my little internet article. It does talk about your allegiance artifact, and I was wondering because as we know, some allegiance artifacts, force you if your general is X. But I thought maybe that rule might come into play, but no. It's just that it's not on the obviously War Scroll Builder and Azir are still being updated. So bear that in mind if you are watching this on YouTube.
Yep. And then there's Teclis, who is the god of Hish, or one of the gods of Hish, who is...
Before we talk Teclis, though, why have you got two Cathazars? What? How do you say it? Sorry?
Cathars. So I've got two because they know this, because they're the support pieces. I only take a Stone Mage in a non-Teclis list because they can't access the Lore of the Mountain. Whereas the Teclis knows every spell from both laws at all times.
Right.
So he has access to like 16 spells or whatever it is across 2 laws in his War Scroll.
And do these heroes have access to Lore of the High Peaks? Is that Lore of Hish, or?
So they have access to Lore of Hish.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And is there any particular spells that you like? Like, you've got Speed of Hish, you've got Solar Flare, you've got Ambient Light, Ethereal Blessing, Total Eclipse, and then Protection of Hish?
Yeah, they all have their uses. In a Teclis list, I'm not really using Protection of Hish because you can't use Protection of Hish and Protection of Teclis in the same turn. That's directly worded from the spells. I love Total Eclipse, which is force your opponent board wide to use 2 command points every time they want to use a command ability. And that's really, really strong. And I think it's one of the things that has definitely been a big standout in this book, is forcing especially armies that like your Gloomspite Gits and things that rely on command points. Suddenly, I know Gits don't really have an issue with generating.
I was just about to say, like, I usually end my games with Gits with about 10 to 12 command points spare.
Yeah.
And obviously the Bad Moon, so the Loon Shrine makes a lot of my army immune to battle shock. But they are a complete outlier. And something that I've been thinking about just then, and I'm sure you've already thought about it, is with General's Handbook 2020, we now know Malign Sorcery is not brought into match play, so it's been retired. So things like Aether Quartz Brooch, which was such a key artifact to be able to generate more command points, is now lost.
Yeah, so, it's because we're hoarding it all now. We're not letting anyone else have our Aether Quartz. It's like, ours. Everyone else can deal with it.
But most armies using 2 command points for Inspiring Presence is brutal. So I think Total Eclipse is going to punish people who either don't have a good CP reserve or don't have some type of allegiance ability or even War Scroll ability. Like I think about my Phoenix Guard being near an Anointed that makes them immune to battle shock within 18. I need more of them because I can't afford every time to do an Inspiring Presence to be spending 2 command points. That I cannot afford.
Yeah, 100%. Speed of Hish is also really good. That's double the movement characteristic of a unit. So it can make things that are slow go towards objectives at like a lot quicker without having to break their Shining Company. It can make Dawn Riders become a guided missile across the board, moving 28 inches. I really like using it on Eltharion, to be honest, and getting him across the board. We'll go through that in a minute. Speed of Hitch is really good. The Solar, I can't remember, is it Solar Eclipse?
The Solar Flare.
Solar Flare, yeah. I think it would be really useful with something like Spell Portal, throwing it through a Spell Portal and then giving enemy wizards -2 to cast and all that kind of jazz.
Because you pick a point in the battlefield within 10 inches. So the Spell Portal is extending the range, which is why you need the Spell Portal here for the caster.
Portal, yeah.
If there is, so when you pick that point on the board, if there's anything, was it at the point, if in endless spells, you just spell it, so you automatically unbind endless spells within range.
Yeah, and if it's a unit, you roll a dice every model in the unit and does mortal wounds.
So we'd be 10 inches from the Spell Portal, right? So you basically measure around the Spell Portal or the wizard, depending on what you're doing. And then you could do some mortal wounds on 6+s. Is that all it does? Oh, and the minuses to cast.
And the minuses
well.
to cast. I think the minuses to cast is the big one, especially if you're, say, going first and then you're throwing that through a spell portal near Croak.
Well, it's not just casts, right? It's -2 to cast dispels and unbinds.
Yeah.
So you've made it harder to get rid of your spells. It's harder to get rid of your endless spells, and and even to get some of my spells off. And I've been talking about this on a few other episodes. Like, the age of the supercaster is here. No longer can you rely successfully on those 5 wound little mages, your Grot Shamans, your Cities of Sigmar battle mage. Because 1, their small wounds are going to die pretty quickly, but 2, to deal with some of this stuff, I think people are going to need to rethink about how they handle this type of thing, because -2 to cast is brutal. Wow.
Yeah. I think that's one that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, just because it's such short range. But if you can extend that range, because like the minute you do it, you're potentially hitting your own units with the minuses, because it's not enemy units, it's all wizards within range. That happens too.
Yeah.
So that's where you want to make sure that you're picking the point and moving away from that point, or picking the point through a portal. So.
And ambient light's pretty decent too, I think.
The
choose an enemy
light.
within an enemy within 18 and re-roll all missile weapons.
Yeah, which is one that is definitely on my Kalithars, or potentially on my my Spearmen, depending on what I'm coming up against. So it's a good little trick as well. From the Lore of the Mountains, or the Lore of the High Peaks, the one that really stands out to me is Voice of the Mountains, which is in your turn, it's a -2 board-wide bravery debuff.
I mean, obviously that comes into play with some of the other Eighth of Quartz reserves, and wow.
Yeah. And then in following turn, so say you get double turned, until your next hero phase, it's -1 to your enemy's bravery board-wide.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it can get, you can, it's a lot of stacking bravery debuffs, which can get really interesting, especially when you combine it with the Cathalar's signature spell. So the Cathalar's signature spell is like Be'lakor. So instead of rolling
let's take that back, because some people may not be using Slaves to Darkness, so they may not know what Be'lakor does. So educate me, fool. What does Be'lakor do for the average person who doesn't know this yet?
Yes, cool. So Be'lakor has an ability where once per game, before you start the game, you write down a unit and you reveal it in your opponent's hero phase. Until your next hero phase, they have to roll a 5-up whenever they want to cast a spell, move, charge, fight, whatever, shoot. They have to roll a 5-up, otherwise they can't do it. The Kalithar has a signature spell on their War Scroll, where instead of your opponent rolling a 5-up every time they want to do something, you roll 2d6, and if it's equal to or higher than their bravery, they don't get to do it.
It's equal or higher to their bravery.
Yeah, the bravery characteristic.
Okay.
So it's Darkness of the Soul. Where is it? Make the roll before the action is carried out. If it's greater, than the characteristic, they cannot perform that action in that phase.
So that won't work as well with, let's say, because I know, like, for example, Lord Croak is a prime target for like the Be'lakor rule, right? Yeah, 5+, 100%. You just can't cast, you can't do stuff. But that would be a little bit harder with those high bravery heroes, right?
Yeah, 100%. But you can get stuff to -2 or 3 bravery. So, and you're rolling 2d6 instead of 1. And the average on 2d6 is 7. So even bravery 10, if they're -2 to their bravery or -3 to their bravery, you're rolling a 7 anyway. So like it can get, like, unless they're bravery 10, like if they're, say, bravery 8, you're bringing them back to bravery 6, bravery 5, you're potentially rolling higher than that anyway. Like there's, and stuff like terrain and all that kind of jazz,
Okay.
Yeah, lots of ways to do it, and you can throw it through a spell portal at stuff as well. I think spell portal is a really good thing with this list, endless spell wise. Same with Palisade and Shackles. I think there's a lot of shenanigans with endless spells.
Yeah, Palisade is one that I really look forward to. Maybe I think the minute I play against it, I'm going to cry and regret what I just said. But let's talk about the supercaster himself, the man that's going to cost you 1/3 of your army,
the big boy.
the one who's going to have the biggest target on his face. It is the Archmage Teclis. So why Teclis? What does Teclis bring to this army? And yeah, talk me more. Like, what does this model do, and is it worth 660?
So in the age of the supercasters we're talking about, so Teclis has no actual dice that you roll if you want to cast magic. So you pick whether you're casting 1 spell, 2 spell, or up to 4 spells per turn. If he casts 1 spell that turn, it goes off and cannot be unbound. If he casts 2 spells in that turn, he casts them on a 12 that cannot be modified, and they can be unbound.
So that if I cast 1 spell, not even Khorne's Hex Gorgeous Skulls would be able to unbind that.
No,
it's just a flat out no unbinding.
Can't be unbound.
It's Warhammer Fantasy Battles would remember this as like total power. Literally cannot do anything about it. That 1 spell is happening. The end.
Yeah, that's it. It's just like, this goes off. Don't roll dice. Just goes off.
Cool. Consistency.
Yeah. So if you cast 2, it goes off with a casting roll of a 12 that cannot be modified. So like your Solar Flare, you're not worrying about because you're not affected by it.
Arcane Terrain doesn't come into play.
Arcane Terrain doesn't come into play. So he also has his own bubble, which is a +1 to cast an unbind bubble. Yeah, so he can't benefit from his own bubble. Then there's if he casts 4 spells that turn, or up to 4 spells in a turn, it's cast on a 10 that can't be modified.
And he can cast 3 or 4, right? It's not like it's 1, 2, or 4. It's 1, 2, 3, or 4, and the 3 or 4 counts as 10 for both of those casts. So for 3 or 4 of those casts. Yeah,
correct.
And I think from like the Maths Hammer episode, like to beat a 10, ignoring the fact that if you cast that spell to like cause a -2 to unbinds and things like that, like to roll above 10 is something like 86% chance of failure. Like it's a super really hard number to beat. So you can almost guarantee, unless the opponent has like +2 to +3 to unbind, like a Rune Lord, for example, +2 an unbind roll, your spells are going off.
Yeah, that's it. So, and for 660 points and a 4-cast wizard, you're kind of hoping he does that. So he's also obviously got Kalaitzidis, who is the Spirit of Hysh. So his aura is a 16-inch aura to start with that brackets down with him, which gives +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls for Lumineth units within that. So if they're Zytrek, they get +1. If Teclis is on the field, they get +2. And they're within that bubble. So it can get a lot of decent spellcasting going on the board. The other bubble that he has is if units are within his aura, they ignore enemy spells and endless spells on a 4-up. And then they pick an enemy unit if they do ignore it, and within 18, and they suffer D3 mortal wounds.
Okay, so they don't bounce the spell back off, but you can ignore the feel no pain, damage prevention, whatever you want to call it. You ignore the spell, but then if you roll that 5+, you then bounce back D3 mortal wounds. 4+. 4+. Wow.
You ignore spells on a 4+ and bounce back D3 mortal wounds onto an enemy unit within 18.
Yeah, I imagine the trap for Teclis is that, much like these other super casters or super characters, right? Your Archaons, your Nagashas, your Alarials, you're probably building around your force is really building around this centerpiece model.
Yeah, and this is where something like Be'lakor really hurts Teclis. So you're kind of banking your army around where Teclis is to get all these buffs, and at the same time, if he's not moving anywhere, then your army's kind of stuck as well. So that's one of the downsides to taking Teclis. He's also got 2 spells on his War Scroll. One's a big Mortal Wound bubble, and the other one is a 5+ shrug in a big aura as well. So he's a really good big support piece, and you can make him ethereal using himself because it goes off on a 10, and then you can use his 5+ shrug bubble, which is 18 inches, and he's suddenly 16 wound model with a 4+ ethereal save and a 5+ shrug, who also has an automatic dispel at the start of the hero phase. He just picks an endless spell within 30 and it's gone.
Yep.
Sorry, it's not at the start of the hero phase, it's any time in the hero phase. So he's like a Lord of Change. So he can say throw out Spell Portal and get rid of it. He can do Life Swarm, which is one that I was looking at, to heal himself or heal a unit and then eat Life Swarm.
Yeah, so, okay. And he's got an auto unbind as well. So he's got like a dispel and an unbind automatically.
Every turn. Yeah.
So he's like his supercaster. He's also like a Hurricanum Luminarch who gives +1 to cast, +1 unbind to other friendly wizards. He's also creating like this amazing aura that's going to reduce spell damages. So should you get off any spells, you're going to be able to do some damage prevention and potentially send it back to you as well. Wow. Craig, how does he stack up compared to some of the other supercasters out there, whether it's we're talking Lord of Change, we're talking about, a Lord Croak, we're talking about Hallowheart, for example. How do you think Teclis is going to stand up to some of these other magical supremacy type builds? Nagash.
I think Nagash will be the big test. I haven't played against Nagash with Teclis yet. I think that'll be the big test. Lord of Change is kind of, I don't know. It's hard to figure out exactly where it sits because you can just pick the spells or whatever it wants to cast, which is the one that definitely wants to get off, and you just go no.
I guess a lot of change is half the damage. Sorry, half the points.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I'm sure you've probably noticed is that you are feeding into the summoning points of Tzeentch. So for every successful cast, you are giving them summoning points, and they're going to be bringing on more pink horrors. You're going to be bringing on things to burn and make the peasants. Yeah.
And that's the thing. There are definitely bad matchups for these guys. That Demon Rift is going to play hell on earth with Lumineth players.
So we're talking about the Slaves to Darkness, the Darkfire Demon Rift that basically comes attached to the Gaunt Summoner. So not only is the Gaunt Summoner bringing up a unit of 10 pink horrors, they're bringing off that Burninator. KO actually have that as well. So
and you can't dispel that as well because it's not being cast; it's just being dropped.
So Spill in the Bottle, because it gets supercharged by the amount of wizards within range. So KO is already a bad matchup for you guys. It's going to come from the sky, just shoot you off the board, especially like something like Teclis. And then you drop Spell in the Bottle. That would be an interesting matchup. Certainly. Yeah.
With Teclis on the board, it's less of an issue because the people who are going to cast it, you can just go, no, I'm going to auto unbind that. So you're not really worrying about it. Plus, he's got that 4+ bubble aura, which is to ignore the Demon Rift if it does come by. So there's a lot of things that you can do to try and prevent it. And that is one of the strengths of having Teclis, is that you're not worried about stuff like your Demon Rift as much. So.
Anything else you want to talk about with Teclis? And I'm interested to see what you do with these points in your other list where we don't have Teclis, and how does that change? But anything else from our friend Teclis?
I think he's a bit of a trap. I think he's very, very good, but for 660 points, you can spend your points better elsewhere because the army is, from what you can see, it can be very super elite with the amount of models that you can get, and it is an objective-based game. So, and with the units being as fragile as they are, stuff can disappear quite quickly, and then you're not well.
So for anyone who's following along later on in the podcast, what Hayden's talking about is we go to the unit selection. So we've got 10 Sentinels, 10 Sentinels, 10 Sentinels, 10 Wardens, 10 Wardens, 10 Wardens, 5 Dawn Riders, and then you've got it all wrapped up in a nice little bubble with the how do I say this battalion?
Orlan region?
I was breaking it up like Orlan
Legion.
And you've also brought Prismatic Palisades, perfect
Sweet
endless spell,
Palisade.
and yeah, but do not leave home without it if you are a Lumineth player, especially if you got your Warden. But talk to me. One, why do we have Sentinels and Wardens? Two, why do we have I guess 3 units of each, and why don't we go bigger sized units? And then finally, what does the Dawn Riders bring that maybe another unit of, I don't know, Wardens or Sentinels wouldn't bring to the table?
Yeah, so units of Wardens make other units battle line. So, for example, for every unit of Wardens you take, a unit of Sentinels or a unit of Dawn Riders also becomes battle line.
So Warden are my sword, my shield and spear guys, right? They're my generic foot troops.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it means in this army right now there are 6 battle line units, which is good for, especially with the new GHB dropping. There are specific ones with.
I was going to say there's one.
Hold it.
Yeah, I think it's. So you get bonus points as well for having a battle line within 6 of I think it's Scorched Earth maybe. But okay, so you've got 6 battle line, which is awesome. Really good for others. I can't remember if it doesn't matter. But you got 6 battle line choices. You got units of 10, 1 wound each. We know that they are. Your Wardens make your Sentinels battle line. Tell me more.
So each one of those is a wizard, which is why I like taking MSU, because they're so fragile. I think if something gets hit by something like, especially a Stonehorn, that is going to do a lot of damage, they can only ever kill 10 models. So, and because each one is a caster, it means I'm getting an extra cast and unbind. Because of the battalion, which is the Orlan Legion, when the general or the Sentinels and the Wardens, when a unit was within 3 inches of another unit, it's a free Mystic Shield. So they're re-rolling ones to their save. So it's the way that I usually run it around is I'll have a unit of Wardens in front with a unit of Sentinels behind, and they'll run as kind of like a little phalanx or a little block around. So that way they've both got Mystic Shield. You're able to protect your shooting unit with your bow, with your spears, but you're also got threat with that 30-inch mortal wounding bow.
So the Sentinels and the Wardens are power pairs. Do you, and this is maybe just from a placement point of view, are you connecting the Sentinels and the Wardens in base-to-base contact? Are you doing it where there's like 1 inch between them?
They're sitting about two inches behind. So because only the unit has to be within 3 of another unit from the battalion.
All right, so they're not, you don't normally find yourself base-to-base contact, but you're keeping them within 3 for that synergy.
Yep, correct. Okay. Yep. So it gives you a bit of board space, especially when you're going towards objectives. It's nice to have a big block of models there that are ready to get onto objectives, as well as control that board space. And since each one's a caster, it gives you that control over where spells are going off, where spells aren't going off. So it's cool. And then you've got that unit of Dawn Riders there who are great for clearing screens, because they do something called furloughing, where when they go into a unit of 1 or 2 wound unmounted models, they get an extra attack on their profile. If they go into specifically 1 wound unmounted models, they get 2 attacks on their profile extra.
So what type of things are you trying to attack with? So when you got your Dawn Riders, like what's a key target for them?
Screens. 1 wound, 1 wound screens. They go in and clear out screens. They're really good at that. They're really good at clearing out battle line. So that kind of key, they're going to hit something and then they want to keep moving. So just hitting those little 10 model screens they're really good for.
We haven't really spoken a lot about the Sentinels, right? Because we talked about the Wardens and they unlock the battle line to Sentinels. They're the pike and shield guys. But the Sentinels are the archers, right? Or the missile weapon. Now, they bring some interesting mechanics to the table, which I cry a little bit when I look at Sentinels and wonder how they can do what they can do, that my Hellstorm rocket battery lost its ability when it got moved into Cities of Sigmar. Because it used to be able to ignore line of sight, a big rocket battery just shooting rockets into the sky. It doesn't need to worry about, the blockage of a realm gate or something in front of it. It just shoots rockets and it hits. But somehow the Sentinels, they've tapped into the power of Hish, and they can ignore line of sight. Wow. Yeah.
So the high Sentinel of the unit has a lantern that he stares into, And he goes, I can see you. They're over that way. So that's how you can see them, apparently.
I thought the Knight of Xeros lantern was good. Wow. How do I get one of these Sentinel lanterns?
Oh, dear. Same place you get an Aether Quartz brooch. You don't anymore. So the thing with all units, or the Vanara units, is that they have Sun Metal weapons. So a Sun Metal weapon on the roll of a 6 does a mortal wound instead of damage.
So the attack stops once you roll that 6?
Yeah, 100%. So
okay.
Unmodified 6 to hit. So that's on the Sentinels, that's on the Wardens, and that's on the Dawn Riders. They all have this ability. And the spell on their War Scroll of each one allows them to do the mortal wounds on an unmodified 5 or 6 instead of just a 6.
Okay, so very similar to the spiders in Gloomspite kits, where you can bring that down. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, so each unit can cast that, and it's unlimited times. Like every unit can attempt to cast it once.
Okay, so it's very similar to your what they call your Stormcast, your Evocators, where they can cast the same spell if you've got multiple Evocators. The rule of 1 doesn't apply to that spell.
Yes, correct. So it means that every unit can do it, which is nice, considering that's the main thing. Like Sentinels, normally they have 30-inch range, they ignore line of sight, but they're 4s and 4s, no rend 1 damage otherwise. So the whole army, like when the Wardens get charged, they get an extra +1 to their wound roll, and they get a -1 rend. The Dawn Riders, when they charge, get +1 to wound and -1 rend. Otherwise, there's no real rend across the army. So you're fishing for mortal wounds generally with the entire army.
Your battalion brings you down to like what, a 3-drop?
I think it's a 4-drop, because you've got the battalion, you've got the extra Kalthar, you've got the Dawn Riders, and you've got Teclis.
Oh yeah, because your Dawn Riders don't fit into it, because your Sentinels, your Wardens, your one of your heroes, not Teclis, not the Dawn Riders. So four drops is
still quite low.
It's very low. Yeah, there's very few armies out there right now doing less than 4. It's a pretty safe space. Would you, in the average game, take first turn or give away first turn? Again, obviously things change, but just average game.
Yeah, it depends on the matchups. If it's a heavy shooting list, I'd 100% take first turn to protect Teclis. Try and make sure that he doesn't get shot off before you get to cast any spells or anything like that, because he needs to be protected at 666 points of your army, and that 4-up save. If I'm against a combat-heavy army and I'm sitting back, I'm potentially not taking that first turn, so I can try and just blast them with spells and mortal wounds afterwards. Again, like the one thing you're worried about is that long-range threat of taking Teclis off. So your Carriage and Overlords, your teleporting Salamanders, your long strike Raptors, stuff that you can't protect Teclis from.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing. Like when I think about this, it sounds like very similar to like a Hallowheart list. And Hallowheart, I always wanted to go second. There's a few examples where I was happy to go first, but most of the time I want to go second, because against spell ranges, that's where I can do some really good damage. But the cool thing is you've got all these screens here that if you've got, for example, I don't know, Carriage and Overlords, and we know that they're going to drop from the sky and they're just going to shoot the absolute living hell out of Teclis. At least with all these screens, you're able to kind of move them up as quick as possible. Try to zone out the board as much as possible so that you limit the amount of shooting damage by pushing out that 9-inch drop, and hopefully limiting the amount of weapons, because they've got some long range, but probably not enough to take down Teclis if you can kind of push them, 18 inches kind of away from him.
Especially if he's ethereal and with a 5-up shrug and with a reroll 1s to save, like he then becomes a lot more durable. Even if you put cogs down and then he's got a 4-up rerolling ethereal save with a 5-up shrug.
Yeah, but if you and KO have a lot of rend, right? So that's just going to chew. He needs that protection. Yeah. And then Prismatic Palisade, I'm imagining, comes in to synergize with the fact that your Sentinels ignore line of sight, so you can always throw up that barrier kind of.
Or you can protect Teclis a lot more with it. So especially like you were saying with the rocket batteries, you throw it down in front of the rocket batteries, and suddenly Teclis is not as worried, and he can move up the board. So.
But you couldn't throw it in front of Teclis because Teclis flies. So that would stop that, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know. I haven't really used Palisade much. I've only just started using it.
It's probably in a good 12 months since I've used Palisade, but at least at minimum, you're blocking line of sight. Usually, like with flyers,
yeah.
So but you're protecting your Sentinels and your Wardens.
Yeah, and you're protecting your Calathars, who are the ones that you really need to protect in this army, because they're stopping things from running. They're the biggest synergy pieces. Teclis is great, but the Calathars are what really stop things from going haywire.
So this list comes in at 2,000 points. You've got your extra command point from your battalion. You've got your 3 of 6 unit leaders. You've got 6 battle line. You've got your 2 artifacts that we've acknowledged. You've got 1 behemoth. Comes in at 96 wounds. So it is a little bit fragile. It's certainly not a horde army, but we know that we can debuff our opponent. We can add pluses to hit. We can do some line of sight blocking shenanigans. So it's a good value 96. It's not cheap bodies. Anything you'd want to add about this particular list? Do we want to kind of, because you did say Teclis was a trap. You've made a pretty bold statement that I want to see what you do with those points.
So like with the Twitterverse out there and just seeing what other people think, I think that's been the general consensus with Teclis, is that yes, he's good, but there's a lot more that you can do with those points.
So why, before I reveal the list, like at a very high level, why is he a trap? Because a Nagash player wouldn't say Nagash is a trap. An Archaon player wouldn't say he's a trap.
Because he's a lot more fragile than those guys. Like, they've got a lot of wounds. They can regenerate wounds quite easily. They're a lot more durable. So Nagash, especially in Petrifex, is 2-up save. Archaon is a 3-up save with wound regeneration. Like, that, I don't feel he's as durable, because Archaon has a built-in after save as well, doesn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I think so.
Like, so does Nagash. Like, so there's definitely a lot of protection there for those 2 specific models. Yes, they cost more points than Teclis, but I feel Teclis is more like an Alariel than an Archaon or a Nagash. And Alariel, along with the rest of Sylvaneth, is quite underwhelming for her points. Yes, she's come down to 600 and she can summon 200 points on, but she melts same way that Teclis I think will, and especially because when you take him, you have to center your army around him, or you're kind of blocked into what you're doing. If you send him out on his own, he's not going to do much. Whereas you can send Archaon out on his own and he's going to go annihilate everything.
And that's it, Nagash, even especially like OBR Petrifex Nagash just walks up with his machine gun arcane bolt, with his 2-up save, with his additional feel no pain. So
-3 or -2 rend 3 damage attacks. Like you don't want to get in combat with Nagash either. Like, and then Nagash heals wounds innately. He doesn't need to cut the spell. He doesn't need to do anything like that. So like with the 4-up save, yes, he's that average save, but with the amount of Rend 2 out there, especially on models at this size, if you lose him, he's gone, and you don't have the bodies to bring back. Like, especially in those armies like Chaos or like Death, you're bringing units and you're bringing models back. Lumineth don't have that option.
And that's been one thing that I've been thinking about. Like, already the start of the year, we've seen Lord Croak starting to annoy people, especially being at the back of the board, right? It's very hard to reach out and touch him. Most people use things like spells to be able to reach such long-range threats. But when I think about my cities, like, I wanted to start playing around with, I've got a couple of builds, but one that I've been playing around with is tapping into those rocket batteries, 36 inches. They can do a whole bunch of damage from long range, and it's going to be able to tap into the Teclises and the Lord Croaks, even the Lord of Change, right? So you're right, losing them, and if I get that jump, that turn 1 jump, and I can shoot you off the board, that's 1/3 of your army in what, 20 wounds? Clearly less than 20 wounds, but
16 wounds. So it gets a bit scary, especially when you've got stuff like the teleporting 20 or 30 Iron Drake lists running around as well. So that are hitting on.
Even in my cities list, I can Tempest Eye. I can take a gun hauler. I can take some ships, and again, I can do the same thing without being a KO army. But I want to kind of bring us home and kind of talk about, like, what does a different list look like if you don't have Teclis? So that's 660 points currently. So we've got the same Great Nation. It is a little bit different. So we've got a Stonemason. We do have the double. Was it Cathazar? No, Cathazar. Cathalars. And then you've got our armor, the Light of Atharian.
Mini Gotrek.
Mini Gotrek. Formerly from the old one. What's his name?
Eltharion the Blind, or Eltharion the Grim. So there were 2 models of him. There was Eltharion on Griffin, and then they made Eltharion the Blind, and then they retconned Eltharion the Blind out of it and brought back Eltharion the Grim.
I remember the Griffin one. That was because I always played Karl Franz, and I played I had my own version of the Griffin. But all right, so Stone Mage, 130 points. What is the Stone Mage? Why is that person there?
He's there so I can take Voice of the Mountains. Literally the only reason he's there. He's a 1-cast wizard that has access to Lord of the High Peaks. So he's there to be my Voice of the Mountains. He sits at the back of the board, in cover, hopefully, casting Voice of the Mountains for the -bravery buff across the board. So, because he doesn't need to be in range of anything.
Okay. Seems alrighty.
Yeah. Cathalar's there for the exact same reason as they are in the last list.
And the Cathalar still has got one as a general, one is not. It's got fast learning, got Silver Wand. I imagine similar, if not the same, spell choices.
Yeah. Light of Eltharion. So the Light of Eltharion is probably one of the prettiest models out of the range. He's pretty much mini Gotrek. 6s to hit, generate extra attacks. Hits on 2s. When he charges, wounds on 2s. One of his attacks is 4 attacks at Rend 3 for D3. The other one is 2 attacks at Rend 1 for D3. He has a shooting attack, which is an ability, so he can run and still do it. Which on a 1 it does nothing. On a 2 to 4 it's D3 mortal wounds, and on a 5 or 6 it's D6 mortal wounds at 18-inch range. He's got a 3-up unrendable save. He can't be negatively modified to hit, so he always hits on 2s regardless of modifiers.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Can the Light of Atharion take a spell, but it's not a wizard?
No.
Is that something that I've read?
That's a misprint. So he's either meant to be a wizard, but I don't think he is, because he's in a unique unit. So he should be able to take artifacts. I'm pretty sure he's not meant to be able to take a spell. He's meant to be like a warrior. He's made of magic. I don't really see him being able to cast it as well. I'm pretty sure.
So this might be just an FAQ that's coming. So even though it says that it can take a spell, you can't actually cast until an FAQ comes out. So just don't try to cast a spell. Because
he doesn't have the wizard keyword.
Yeah.
So that's why he's very good. He's very, very good.
Well, I mean, for 220, like that's a combat beat stick that you probably don't have unless you're taking the battle cattle.
Yeah. I played a game against Ironjaws the other day. I had a Maw Crusher teleport into my back lines. He turned around and killed the Maw Crusher in one combat.
No.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like 1/3 of the price, or just under 1/3 of the price of a Gotrek. Gotrek's what, 540 or something, or 520?
Yeah, 520, I think. and he doesn't have the double pile in, and he doesn't have an after save, but he's got a double pile in, and he doesn't have an after save, but he's got a 3-up unrendable save. So, and there's plenty of ways around to give him a 5-up shrug with protection of Hish, protection of Teclis. The realm laws, if there's, if you're playing in Hish, everything's mystical. There's definitely ways to get after saves, but a 3-up unrendable, you use a command point to go, cool, he's got a 3-up rerolling 1's unrendable save. And he also halves damage, is another point to bring up. So, yes. So from melee and missile attacks, he halves the damage.
Okay. Wow.
So
okay.
Spells he doesn't, but from attacks in combat or from shooting, he halves that damage.
How many wounds?
7.
Okay, so you probably, an army probably wants to concentrate a lot of the damage, and I guess that means that the damage is not going into your sentinels, it's not going into your other troops. Yeah. And the fact that obviously we know the sentinels and your wardens lose the spell casting when they go under 5 models, which means that for every interesting. So you're going to make your opponent make some very tough choices. Do I take down those sentinel battle lines and the warden battle lines and get those wizards off the table, or do I put all of my focus and emphasis on this thing, which is going to take a lot of focus and damage, and in return, you've still got your 4, your 6. In this particular list, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. You still got another 6.
But I've added in an extra 10 Dawn Riders, so an extra 10 horses.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I guess my point is that do I take down the units? Do I take down the hero? You're making a really tough choice. And some opponents will split their attacks, and that'll always be the bad decision. It never works out well.
Yeah. No, it doesn't, especially when you can you've got speed of Hish. So the one issue that he does have is he still only does move 6 inches. But if you throw in
he's suddenly moving 12 inches and just getting across the board.
Yeah, brutal. I wish that could be an ally to my Cities of Sigmar for 220 points. I would happily take that model any day of the week.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with Lumineth as well, is that the only ally that they can have is Deepkin for some reason.
That's an odd one.
Yeah, it is a very odd one considering Teclis went full genocide on them.
Yeah, so. I guess maybe the promise of Christmas presents might get some eels into the list. Would you take any Deepkin or anything that would and by the way, for anyone who's following on the podcast, you've got 3 units of Sentinels, 3 units of Wardens. As Hayden's already said, he's got a unit of 10 Dawn Riders and another 5 Dawn Riders. So we've increased the Dawn Riders from the last list. We still have the same battalion, the Aurelane Legion. You've also got the Prismatic Palisade, same as the last list, but you've also brought the Soul Snare Shackles. So that rounds you out at 1990. Fascinating. Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing this and kind of getting an experience, because I've got a lot of ideas in my head on how I would combat this. But I think when we get out of the, COVID, and I don't want to go into this, but, once we kind of get back into the competitive scene, I see this particular book maybe not being a 5-0 army, certainly not for a long time. I think there are bad matchups, but they will create new challenges that opponents are going to have to answer. I know for myself, I'm thinking about my army, and I've been really enjoying Tempest Eye lately in Cities of Sigmar, but I'm wondering, do I need to go back to Hallowheart? Because Hallowheart has some really interesting mechanics, and is going to allow me to be a supercaster army despite being based around 5 and 6 wound heroes. On the flip side, if I'm my Gloomspite Gitz, I'm thinking at the moment, like, my Gitz has a lot of bodies, and it has a lot of small wizards. Now, those wizards don't get a lot of pluses to cast, so the likelihood of being able to throw endless spells like I used to, or getting off some of those smaller spells without the buffs, is going to be a whole lot harder now, especially if Teclis is on the table. So how does that change my list design? Do I even bother doing it, and I just kind of ride it out and I just hope I don't play a Lumineth? Or if Facebook and Twitter is true, and I'm seeing a lot of Lumineth models being painted, is it likely that you're going to see these armies on the table? And I think they will be a gatekeeper for you to go 5-0 at a tournament or to do well. I think they pose interesting questions that people haven't been thinking about. Do I have the answer yet? And how do I answer that?
Yeah. And especially because you're not going to be protected by Lookout Sir from these guys. So especially in like a Gits army, you're like, I can hide out. I'll have like all these minuses to hit. So your heroes may be like -2 or 3 to hit. They're just fishing for mortal wounds anyway on all the shooting.
Yeah.
So they can be 30 inches away, shoot you with 2 units, and then do 5 or 6 mortal wounds at a 5-wound character.
Well, most of my Grot Wizards are like 4 wounds, and they might have like a damage prevention roll, but all you need is and a lot of armies at the moment have these 4 to 5 wound heroes. And some of the new General's Handbook scenarios are rewarding you from having a hero with your battle line, or you get additional victory points if the hero is within 6 of the objective. Yeah. So what it means is that most people can't take big heroes to kind of be following around with their battle line. They've got to support them with small heroes, but you have the perfect tools to snipe those heroes out.
Yeah, exactly. I think the biggest hurdle these guys are going to face are low dropping, high rend or big range shooting armies. So your KO, your auxiliary chamber from Stormcast, your teleporting Seraphon, your flamers of Zeech, those kind of things are going to be big issues for this army. And Deepkin, because you can, even though you can ignore line of sight, you can still only shoot the closest unit. And that's the big thing. So
Cities of Sigmar, maybe Living City, I can see as being one, or even the Tempest Die that takes a Carrigan Overlord build.
Yeah, the Tempest Die, yeah. Especially there's one of the big City of Sigmar players in Australia. Here's Simon Hall. He's in my club and I played a lot with him recently. His Iron Drake list is scary in Tempest Die. And I don't have an answer for it right now with anything that I can throw out with this army just yet. Had a few games against similar lists to that. Teclis was a big help against that because obviously you can stop the bridge, which is a big thing with those kind of armies that have that low movement but need that teleport. But in Tempest Die, they can still move really far without having to use the bridge and can run and shoot.
I was thinking Living City because you can put 1 in every 2 units can come on the side of the board, and again that counts as a setup, not a move, so they get additional shooting. But like, I know this is not the Cities of Sigmar show, but it's I guess thinking, but it's more about thinking through that as you're list building. You've got to be worried about, and I guess opponents like me are now thinking about not just how do I tap like a Teclis, but Lord Croak is doing the same thing. So we know Seraphon is really being strong at the moment. So and even Zench, Lord of Change is out there. So it's like people are now getting sick of being bullied by you guys. So expect people you'll catch somebody out once. But you'll likely see OBR probably bring more catapults to the table. You'll probably see rocket batteries. You'll see Stormcast with the long strikes. You'll see more long range shooting than you've probably ever seen when tournaments resume.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a new meta once we come out of the current global situation. And I think everyone during this has probably been painting a lot of salamanders from
not from Games Workshop and from Mercia Miniatures.
Yeah, or a few other 3D printed versions of the old salamanders. We're going to see a lot of salamanders and a lot of flamers in the next. But
at least salamanders only 12 inches, right? So I know they can drop from the sky. And a Starborn, again, if you can get the drop and you can push your screens forward, you can probably block the salamanders from verminating. But
it's still scary. It's still very scary.
Sure.
What is it? I played a game against someone the other day on TTS where they had the 20 chameleon skinks that come in and shoot things off the table because they come in that 9 away, but I think they've got like a 16 or 18 inch range. So they're able to hit the stuff behind while the salamanders hit the stuff in front.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's the key, and that's probably where you're talking about Teclis. So if you are going to take Teclis, you want to be very smart and think you've got screens. You want to be thinking about positional play. You want to be thinking about protecting Teclis as much as possible, because that is a big loss. There is, when people see Teclis, they're going to try to take it out, as much and quick as possible, which could work in your favor. It means that, it's just distraction card effects, and the rest of your army goes and scores objective points, but it is a heavy loss. So
it is a heavy loss. It's a much of a muchness in terms of, because as good as the Sentinels and the Wardens are, they are the Wardens are on a 4-up save. The Sentinels are on a 5-up save. Like, they're quite squishy. 1 wound each. Bravery 6 and 7. Like, they're quite easy to deal with. And like we were saying, like, that's 4s and 4s for the Sentinels. With their shooting at no rend. Like, they can be very swingy both ways. Unlike stuff like your long strikes and your rocket batteries, which can get to like 2s and 2s with heaps of rend, doing D3 damage each.
Yeah.
Like,
I was playing with my cities the other week, and I had each of my rocket batteries hitting on 2, so 3 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 2s, rend -2 for D3 damage, 3 attacks each. That'll clear a Teclis in one turn.
Yeah,
probably half. I can probably clear 2 Teclises in one turn.
Yeah. So like the Sentinels are good for that ignore line of sight, but and mortal wounds. But other than that, they're still a 1-shot each, 4s and 4s. So like, you're really banking on fishing for those mortal wounds. Otherwise, they're not really going to do much. They're like dryads from a long way away.
Poor old dryads.
Poor old dryads.
Look, and I said to Hayden before we kicked off the show that we are going to do a deep dive. So normally I wouldn't do a show like this until after an FAQ. We don't know what changes are going to come. For example, the Light of Atharian may actually be a wizard, and obviously that then changes the mechanics and how you use the army. But we will do a faction focus on this book once the second set of the range comes out, and we've obviously got an FAQ, a bit of clarity around some of the rules. I know there are a few interactions that need clarity. Any final closing comments, anything that you want to share that maybe we haven't touched on when it comes to this more elven style Lumineth Realm Lords?
Get out and try, and if you're interested in the army, go through a copy of the book if you've got a copy of the book, or try and get your hands on a copy of the book. They're definitely a interesting army to play. It is definitely an army that will challenge you to play better. You can't just be everywhere at once, and then if you make a mistake, get back to where you were positional wise. They're just an interesting, challenging army, and the models are gorgeous. I'm obsessed with them, as you can probably tell.
You've been super excited. I know your heart kind of like broke significantly when we realized that Tyrion wasn't a part of this particular book.
Yes.
But we obviously, that probably means that there is a part 2, Tyrion's force.
Yeah, 100%. Well, there's lots and lots of references to him in the book. So, like the with the lore as it is, there's 8 parts of Hysh, or great cities in Hysh. 4 are Teclian, 4 are Tyrionic. So, and the normal, like your Dawn Riders and all that, have both symbolism of both gods, because they're twin gods of Hysh. So hopefully that means that they're in both armies. Hopefully it's just 2 halves of Lumineth coming through.
That's my thought. Like I think about this, and we talked about this before. As my expectations were like when if you were old Age of Sigmar, when Khorneverse came out, you had this Khorne Bloodbound book, and then it was kind of expanded upon with a different release. Stormcast was the same. You had Stormcast, then you brought out the like Draconian type. I can't remember.
The Extremist Chamber.
Orders to Extremist Chamber was kind of a little expansion, and then they kind of amalgamated the books a little later. And I would not be surprised, Tyrion fans, if there's another book coming, I don't know, next 12, 18 months, and there'll be a new range, and, they might stand alone, and they might have Stormcast allies, and they might be more of that type of style. And then you bring them together, and you can bring Teclis and Tyrion and spend like 1,500 points on 2 heroes. Yeah.
And I will be very broke, because living that student life definitely is not great when they release lots of pretty models like this.
That's why you need to be Gargants. You got 1 kit coming. Hayden, This has been awesome. We're going to do another show. I definitely want to do another show. I want to do a deep dive, a proper deep dive. We look at everything. Maybe Liam. We'll see how Liam performs. But this was really informative. I really like your build. I'd be interested for people who have built their own list to see how different they are to your list and how they're kind of putting it all together. Because I guess with only a limited amount of models currently out, it's hard to build out a 2,000 point force and practice and prepare. So this is something that's easy to work with and even proxy as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. I've got 30 of the old high elf archers that I'm using as my sentinels because they're elvish archers. Because again, we don't know when the range is going to drop, and there's a few events coming up that I just want to get them out on the table and play some games with. So. Yeah.
Any final comments, any shout outs you want to make before we kind of bring this home?
Shout out to the aggressively average crew. Loving life out there, rolling dice, having fun. Being middle table heroes. And screw you, Liam. Love you, babe.
Screw you, Liam. All right, guys. Hayden, thank you very much. Guys, don't forget to roll more sixes. You'll do better. That's the coach's advice to you. No, I was trying something different. Yeah, don't forget your triumph, although there's only now 3 if you'd watched the video where you've got your general's handbook. So there's only 3 triumphs now, but roll more sixes. All right. See you guys.
See you guys.
Bye. G'day. I hope you enjoyed that video and you're left with some new ideas. One of the biggest ways you can contribute to AOS Coach is by liking the video you just watched and leaving a comment in the comment section. This lets YouTube know this is a good video and it should recommend it to other hobbyists. If you'd also like to support the channel even further like these bloody legends, go check out AOS Coach on Patreon. Otherwise, don't forget your triumph.